So should I start? Are you ready? You're ready? Okay. It's good? All right. Okay. Good afternoon again. I'll try to speak slowly, and if you have trouble hearing me or understand me, just raise your hands. I'll try to do that slowly. So I don't know. So this will be the tutorial section, right? So the idea is for this particular one, I'm going to talk about the writing, right? So how do we write effectively, like writing scientific papers, right? So I will just talk about different sections and talk about my experience and give you some my personal experience. But if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand and we can talk about it. So can you hear me okay now? Okay, all right. So I guess first I start, so basically talk about, I have a lot of experience writing, right? So, I've been writing many papers, including in the most, hard journal to publish, right? So I do have a lot of publications myself, and my work was highly used by other researchers. Talk about in the morning, and also I serve editor for several journals. So for example, I'm the editor-in-chief for Journal of Arid Environments. Right? So that one is a journal specifically deal with any research related to arid environment. Right? It's a multidisciplinary journal. Right? We have hydrology, we have people doing anthropology, we have people doing animal study. Right? So they are very diverse. So some doing remote sensing. Right? So it's a quite diverse range of topics. So I'm the only editor-in-chief. I read every single paper submit to that journal. Right? So I probably reject 50% of the submission initially, and then after that I have a 10 editor working with me. Right? I send the paper to them. They will handle. Right? So I'll be the kind of the gatekeeper, the first person to read and also make the final decision, right? So, I can share experience. What a terrible paper is, I can easily reject, right? So that's my experience for that. And also, I'm an editor for HIS, right? Hydrology and Earth System Science, right? So maybe you've heard of that. That is EGU journal, right? So it's from European Geophysical Union. So it's specialized for hydrology subject. And also I'm a social editor for Journal Hydrology. So probably it's one of the major journals for hydrology field. So I handle some paper for them since I'm super busy. So for this journal, I handle almost 1,000 submissions per year. Like I read every single of them, right? So it's actually a lot of work. So for them, I handle much less. And also, I'm an editorial member for scientific data. That is one of the journal belong to nature groups. So this one is specifically published like a data paper, right? If you have a data set you think it's worthwhile for other people to use, you can publish in this journal. It's pretty highly used. I think a pretty high impact factor for this journal. Right? So I guess the point is I do write paper myself, and also I handle others' paper. Right? So I do have a lot of experience reading papers, writing papers. So that's why I think it's good to share you some first-hand experience about writing papers, about reading others' papers. So when we think about the journal article, right? So it's actually to me is compared to a lot of creative writing, right? Write an essay or something, it's actually quite straightforward to write because you have a fixed format, right? For most of journals, you really, need to work on the main sections, right? So typically you have a title page that includes the title of the article and then, all the authors, all the affiliations of the author, right? So typically that's the title page, the first page. And then you have a second page specifically have an abstract, right? So talk about, what's a kind of a short summary of your paper. And then you have a introduction section, you have a method section, right? Result section, and then discussion section. Sometimes people combine results and the discussion into one place, especially for the shorter journals, right? So for geophysical research letter, like JRL, right? For like a AGU journal, right? So a lot of people, they will combine results and the discussion in one section, just be more efficient in space. And then, because sometimes you have acknowledgement is optional, and then you have a literature section, right? So that's kind of the almost like a fixed format for like most of journals, right? So, and then we know in general what each section should tell you, right? So the abstract, really you should have an overview of this paper. Abstract is a kind of mini paper. And then you have an introduction, talk about, why this question you study is important, right? Why it's novel, right? So that's the place you try to make the argument for that. And then you have the material method, right? So the method section really, you have to write how exactly you did the thing you did, right? And then the results, you talk about what the major finding you have. And the discussion really, extending the results. After you're reporting the results, you should interpret, right? So what is actually the results means and why that results happen that way, right? So you have to add certain interpretation for the results, and also what are the broader implications of your results, right? So that's a discussion. And then, optional ones like acknowledgements, right? So where is your funding source, right? Especially you have external money, you need to put there, right, for writing reports later. And also, maybe your group members helping you out with that project, you need to send them. And then you have a literature section, right? You refer to, whatever the previous papers you use in your study. And then a lot of time, people use appendix, all called supplementary material, right? Especially for top journals, right? If you write a paper to Nature, right? Your paper may be 5 pages. As a supplementary material, probably 100 pages, right? So that's very common, right? So, yeah, so that's depends on the journal, right? Many journals you don't need this, you don't need supplementary information there, right? So that's an option. So I guess that's kind of the overall the major component for a research paper. So what I'm going to do is I just go to different sections, give you the idea what's needed, and give you some examples and give you some thoughts about different sections. And if you have questions, for different sections, how to write that well, you can ask me, and I can maybe share further information. So we'll start from beginning. So we'll start from the title part. So I guess for title, really, you need to be specific. Talk about what's the content you try to answer. Right? It doesn't have to be a complete sentence. It's really a phrase, really. Right? So sometimes the better title, you actually already tell the readers what exactly you found in what the whole paper about. That I will consider the best title. right? So people read your title, they already know exactly, what's your major finding from this paper, right? So, for titles, you try to avoid using jargons like the terms only specific to your field, right? Try to use general language everybody can understand, right? So that is the kind of the common practice you should aim at to write your title. And also, for good title, you try to avoid using like how this happened, why this happened, things like that. That's not considered as a good title. Try to avoid using them. So that's basically kind of the general idea about title. So I gave you an example of your course coordinator role, right? So I'm a co-author. So this is a good title, right? So talk about the specific characteristic of a flash job in India, right? So that's give you the major content of this paper, right? So that is a good title. But like I mentioned, that's you could be better, right? So depends on the subject you are working on, depends on the results. For example, this one I think would be better title. Right, so this one talk about vegetation greening, mitigate the impact of increasing extreme rainfall. Right, so this is a paper I'm co-author from a colleague from Indiana University. We'll talk about this paper specifically later on. We'll talk about this I think tomorrow. But I just give you some examples, right? So this one would be, I would say, like a standard title, right? It's good one, right? Give you the key content of the paper, right? So people know what you did, what your major subject of your study. And this one already tell you what the key finding is, right? So basically, you already know what, you don't even need to read abstract. You already know, okay, what the key finding is. So that's good, because sometimes people are lazy, right? So they may not read the full paper, they only read abstract. Some are even lazier, they only read titles, and they already know what your main results is. If they can use your results, right? Because as a scientist, when you write your papers, the final goal of your writing paper is not to get published, right? So publish, sure, you want to get published. That's first step. But the final goal is you should want people to use your paper, to cite your paper. That should be your final goal, right? So whenever you write any sections, you should keep that goal in mind, right? Why I should write a certain way? Because it will make the reader easier to actually digest the information, to actually to use your paper, use your funding, right? So that will be your final goal. I guess just keep that in mind. Yeah, again, feel free to stop me anytime, right? So I will have a short lecture, and then there will be a quick exercise later in the end. So that's a title page, right? Should be straightforward, right? And then title page also typically include authors, right? So of course, author really, who contribute to the work, right? So really, you can think like typically the person who wrote the paper should be the first author, right? So that's the typical role. But all authors should make significant contribution, right? So you can't, find the people to be author just because these people is your advisor. If the people didn't contribute anything, they shouldn't, right? So there are ethic issues, right? So when we think about the guideline, right? So there are different societies, different journals have their guidelines in terms of who should be on the author list. So that's guideline from Nature Group. So they will talk about what their expectations for authorship for authors. Right? So the idea is, each author should make a significant contribution. So the contribution could come from different aspects. So the contribution could maybe help you conceptualize the work, design the work, right? So that's contribution. Or could maybe your fellow graduate student help you get the data, or help you with the data analysis in the lab, or just doing the statistic analysis help you for that, or create some new program softwares to help you analyze the data. So, and also maybe someone help you like edit the paper intensively, help you to polish, to extend, to improve the paper. So they have to make some important contribution for one of these areas. So that's one of the requirement. So really the contribution part. And also the second part is when you submit a paper in theory, all the authors should approve the final version. They should all agree, okay, that is the final version we will submit, right? So because sometimes that happens, people submit a paper and the co-author said, my concern wasn't addressed yet. I'm not proving the final version. That's occasionally that happens. So that will be author dispute. And also the third part is really, the first part is kind of the credit part, because we know authorship is good. You want to publish more papers. You want to co-author more papers. That's a credit, right? So that's a good thing. So the third part is really the responsibility part. So when you grade on a co-authorship for a paper, really you also take the responsibility. Right? If you are co-author to a research paper, right, you are not only responsible for the credit, you're also responsible for if the paper, for example, gets retracted, that's your problem too, right? So even you said, okay, I only work on this section, and the problem section is that section. It's not my problem, but basically the expectation in scientific world is if you are co-author on that paper, regardless the section you work on, you guys are on a team. You grade, you sign on for that. If there are blames, you need to take the blame too, right? Besides credit. But of course, there's small chances, like scientific misconduct or things like that. But you need to pay attention. Authorship not only carry credit, it also carry responsibility, right? So, does happen. As editor, I know, for example, somebody proposed a special issue, right? So, as an editor, I just approve the kind of the science content, and then there will be people, publisher above me. They will actually look at all the guest editors' profile. They will actually check whether they have a misconduct or some plagiarism or something like a on record. If they are, they will tell me, don't prove the special issue, things like that. So it does happen in the past. So that's if you co-author a paper that has issue, so it's actually affect you in the long term. So that's why be careful about authorship. Yeah. So that's not only credit, there are other purposes as well. So after title and authorship, right? So the next part will be abstract, right? So abstract to me is really a mini paper, right? So abstract, you should have almost everything about that paper, right? First sentence will basically the background of your study, right? Why I study this, why this is important, and then the second sentence, first sentence the background, and then second you'll probably talk about what's the knowledge gap of this field, and then you'll talk about what I did, the method, and then what your finding is, and then talk about the implication or interpretation of that finding. Right? So abstract is almost like a mini paper. Right? So that is a good abstract. Right? So depends on the journal you are submitting. Right? So some require very short, like abstract. Some could be longer. Right? So it's a big range in terms of how long that one is. So I just give you don't have to read, but that's essentially the abstract from the flooding paper I mentioned earlier. So, essentially you can look at, you first talk about what the background of the study, and then you typically talk about, what's the knowledge gap already there, right? And then you talk about what you did, to try to address that knowledge gap. And then you talk about what's the results you found. And then you talk about the implications, right? What's the implication of the results, right? So a lot of journals right now, they give you the option to write a plain language summary. So especially AGU journals, so they almost require, I think, for many journals, you have to write something, for general audience. So yeah, keep that in mind for. So some journals, it's a requirement. But the idea is you not only want your paper published, you actually want people to use your paper. So this one will be actually a very good way to convince people not in your field to still think, okay, that is a useful study, that is a good study. So make sure you have this mentally prepared. So that's abstract, right? So yeah, any questions, comments? Okay. So yeah, again, I just follow the section. We just talk about the different sections, what general expectations you should think about, and what are the good practice you should pay attention to. So, and then the next section is the introduction section. I put a comment there. To me, I think the difficult section to write, one is the introduction section, one is the discussion section, right? So I typically ask my student, that's two sections, they should pay more attention, also spend more time on that section, right? So for the introduction section, you need to basically provide a lot of information. For example, what the major question of your study is, right? Why it's interesting, why it's important. And also, you should give a very brief literature review of this subject, right? So essentially, you tell people you know what you are talking about, right? You already did your research for this subject. You already know what has been done and what's still not new and what not known, right? That's why you will do this study, right? So you have to have that literature review part. And then, typically last bit of the introduction, people will talk about specifically in this paper what my goal is, right? So you have 1, 2, 3 goals. That's kind of most common way people write introduction. And in terms of the structure of the introduction, people tend to think, that's a kind of inverted triangle, right? So the idea is you start from a bigger picture, right? So what's the general, why this field is important, what's the general field, and then you go into specifics slowly, right? So you narrow down to the specific of your particular field, and then talk about what not known, what need to be done, right? So that's a kind of a general structure, a good structure for introduction. So I guess, the idea is introduction, why is harder? Because you need preparations in terms of literature collection. You need to read a lot of papers. You need to know what has been done, what has been known, right? So because if the stuff you are doing already done, right? So there's no point you do that. You have to have some novel aspect, right? The novelty could be small, could be big, right? So, but it has to be novel to a certain degree, right? So you have to have the novelty, right? So the big novelty you can publish in Nature, in Science. Smaller advance you can publish in disciplinary journals, right? So, but you have to emphasize that novelty. And how you prove that novelty, right? So that's basically, you have to have a literature review to show people, I already done my homework, I know what has been done, and my research is actually new in that aspect, right? You have to clearly mention that. So, as editor, right, so like I mentioned, 50% of the paper I would reject for the journal I'm handling, right? So, novelty is one of the things, if you do make that clear, that's a easy one to reject. Just say there's nothing new in this, people already know, right? So, you basically need to emphasize that yourself. You have to make that clear. Any questions, comments about the introduction section? Okay. So again, that's need your read a lot of reading, right? So to be able to write well about the introduction section. And the next section, typically we write is a material and the method section. So this section and the result section are the two sections I consider easy one, right? So I will ask my students to start writing them, especially for the inexperienced student, like when they just started. I will suggest them writing these two sections first, material and method and the results, right? So the reason for this is, this section you really talk about something you already done, you know what you did, right? So really you try to find a good logic, either like maybe the material you use, the study region you have, and then what data set you use, what the statistic method you use, whatever the logic you found, you follow that. And then you can just write what you did for different sections, right? So a lot of time we use subsections, right? So because again, like mentioned, you could have a study region, you describe the climate, the geography, right? And then you have a data set section where you collect all the data set, right? What's the resolution? How do you, downscaling or, harmonize the data, things like that. And then what's the analysis you did? What kind of how do you calculate certain parameters, things like that. So you typically need several subsections to put them into different sections. So typically you don't want to put any results in this section, right? So only if the results is validate a certain method, you can mention, I use this method and I compare this method with the previous method is so good, like from only the results specifically related to the method you put there. Very rare you put results in this section. So because it's already been done, right? So typically you should use past tense for method section, right? Because everything already been done, right? So yeah, this one again I would say like the most straightforward ones. So if you just start writing your paper, right? So try to start from this, right? You always start from easier one and then deal with the harder ones later, right? So that's the method section, and then typically after that you will have your results section. So again, I will consider this will be easier ones to write as well. So result section, essentially you present your key findings, your key results. So of course, most of the time we'll use graphs, we use figures, we use tables to facilitate the reporting of the results. Right? So a common mistake is that people tend to try to interpret the results in results section. So, but that's actually discussion material. You don't really discuss results. You just report A is larger than B. Like A is correlated to B, things like that. You don't need to explain why A is larger than B, why A is correlated to B, right? So there's no need to write that in the results section, right? And also, like results section similar, right? Because you have a different part. A lot of time people use subsections to organize results, more logic order, right? So the most common way people use results is also past tense, right? Because results has been done, right? That's what you already found. You use past tense. So that's different from discussion section. Discussion section, because you already talked about whatever already there. You can use present tense, right? So that's a major difference in terms of tense. So again, results really to me is should be straightforward to write, right? So especially you are doing something, you produce a figure, right? You already know, okay, that's kind of the results I'm going to present, right? You can already start like writing that, right? So yeah, I think that's this section, the method section should be the ones you start as soon as possible, right? So because for method, when you're doing things, you already know what you did, right? You can start recording what you did later, just put them together and put them in more organized way, in more logic way, right? So these two sections are relatively straightforward to write. So I guess some common issue you try to avoid, right? So for example, sometimes when people write results, they write very tedious ones, right? So they actually talk about every single numbers in the figure, every single numbers in the table, right? So like have a very long paragraphs. That's not recommended, right? So because the purpose for results is summarize the key finding, right? So the figure already there, right? You can say, A is larger than B. You don't have to say A is 10, B is A. So that's why A is larger than B, right? So because the figure already tell you the number there, right? You don't have to repeat that, right? So that's a common mistake, kind of being tedious, being redundant, try to avoid that. And also, in the beginning of your writing, some people maybe have the same data. You present both figure and the tables. You present in both ways. That's highly discouraged, right? So because they are the same results, you have to decide you use either figure or table. You don't want to present them twice, right? So don't try to use the same data present different ways. So this is basically the same idea as figure and table. Try to, when you report your results, try to summarize the results first and report that way. That will be much better than just report every single number very tedious ways. Try to talk about means, percentage rather than raw values. So I guess here just some common issues for the beginners. Maybe if you already have a lot of experience, that's not an issue, but just keep that in mind. So typically the last major section to write after results, that will be the discussion section, right? So again, I will consider this one will be a hard one, right? Probably the hardest section to write out of the whole paper, right? So the purpose for this section, right? After you report your results, you essentially have to explain, right, why that happens, why is your results the way they are, right? So that's the purpose of a discussion, right? But a good discussion, besides explain what the results are, you also want to put the results in a bigger context, right? What the results actually relevant to other people's finding, right? How that help interpret certain things or explain certain things for others, right? So that's why results discussion section also require you have a lot of the accumulation of literature knowledge, right? Who did this, and what I did, what my result, how my result relevant to others, right? So you need to have some concrete evidence for that to report, right? So that is kind of the purpose. Like a lot of the newer journals, they require you to report the limitation section, right? Or study constraints, something like that. Especially for, I think, Nature Communications, that's required. I forgot. I think Science Advance also required. So they're like top journals. They really pay attention to that. They actually, you have to have this section, right? So you have to write the limitation yourself. You have to be transparent to readers about your major constraints of this study, right? But not all the journals require that. But it is a general good practice to actually have that even for regular journals, right? So that's help you to kind of convince reviewer you actually think about certain limitations yourself, but that's the best you can do. It's still valuable, right? So give people the idea you already try your best for that. It's actually help you, right? So I would encourage you to think about that. Like actually write that on your own and in your discussion section. So discussion similarly, typically you have multiple sections for discussion section, and like we mentioned, because right now you already discussed current results now. So commonly people actually use the present tense. You don't have to use past tense in discussion section. So that's kind of the common way people does. So that's kind of the major component for a research paper, right? So I can just give you some comments for different sections. Any questions? Any doubts like you have about certain sections before we go on? Okay. And then a lot of time, right? So people has a conclusion section or summary section, right? So that's I put an optional there, right? So not every paper has that. It's not required for any journals. But it's a good way to have it because after people reading the long discussion, you want to remind them what really the main results is, what the key finding is. So again, you want to help reader to understand your paper better, to use your paper, right? So it's good to have a conclusion or summary section for any paper, right? So I would encourage you to have that. So, but typically you don't want to add new information there, so everything should be already talked about. So it should be a summary of the existing reporting already, right? So don't report anything new there. And try to, so you can say that there is some similarity between abstract and the conclusion, right? So you can't avoid them. There must be some overlap, especially the key results, right? So that's the things you want to talk about. But try to not make them exactly the same or like almost same, right? So that's won't help you, right? So basically the editor will maybe ask you to remove one of other. I mean, likely the conclusion section, right? Because abstract is required. So I guess that's just a common sense for conclusion. I think it's always good to have one, but don't repeat like an abstract. And then like optional sections would be basically the acknowledgements, right? So who actually help you, who gave you funding, right? So that's optional, right? So not every paper have that, right? And also the last one will be reference section, literature cited section. Yeah, just this one, just make sure is format consistent, but also is matching the paper you are submitting, right? So every journal has their own requirement, right? So make sure you meet that requirement, right? So, and for the newer journals or there are new requirement. A lot of time people require you to write a data availability statement, right? For all the Nature journals, you have to have this. And the AGU journals, you have to this as well, right? So you basically have to report where you store your data, and how give the link. You have to make sure your data is public available, right? So that's many journals try to push that direction, right? So elsewhere journals they don't yet, but you have to write, say, I'm available to share the data if other people request. You have to write something like that, but not like a detailed information. So, and then again, depends on the journals. A lot of time people will have supplementary materials or kind of appendix. You just give you could be additional text. Sometimes because of the journal constraint, either method section or some other section is very short. You have to report your method in more detail. That's called supplementary text, right? So that could be part of the supplementary material. But more commonly, you have a supplementary tables or supplementary figures, and they are the ones actually showing the results. You use them to back up your conclusion or back up your method, right? So you use them. Yeah, just make your argument stronger. Questions so far? Okay. And then last bit will be tables and figures, right? So I guess the rule of thumb is for tables you put the table title on the top, right? So and also for figures and the tables they should stand alone, right? So you should explain all the acronyms in a table, like AI, right? You should say already index, not Air India, right? So things like that. So you just have to explain them every time you use them. Even like table 2, use that again. You should explain again, right? So because the idea is every table, every figure should stand alone. You don't have to use this table to understand this table. Everything should stand alone. And same for figures, right? But for figures, the legend or figure title should be at the bottom, right? So that's the common convention, right? So if you don't do that, people may think you don't know the convention. That's not good, right? So yeah, table title on the top, figure title at the bottom, right? So, but again, you want to explain all the acronyms in your figure, right? So even the different figure use same acronyms, you want to explain them again and again. Even there takes some space, but that's actually help the readers to directly understand the figure. So that's the kind of the major component for a research paper, right? So how different sections works, what my experience, my comments about different section, and last bit, what I'm going to talk about is, how do you make your writing stick, right? How do you write, when you write proposals or when you write papers, how do you organize your writing in a way like people can naturally understand, right? So there are actually ways to do that, right? So I will show you a video. So he's a former professor in the university, and then I think he started like making like a script, helping people write. That's he come up the idea like and but therefore structure. And so how do you use that structure to make your writing more impactful? So hopefully that works. I will show this video, and then I will show you example I wrote in terms of and but therefore. That's a structure. And but therefore. You think about that structure. For any writing you have, you should think about that. Even for presentations, you should think about that structure. And then last bit, we'll have an exercise using that structure, write something about your research. So let's see whether this one will play. I don't have an internet. It seems to be working.
Storytelling.
Do you know what will happen if you read one book every week?
I try to make the sound a little bit bigger. So let's see.
Storytelling.
Can you guys hear it? That's too small, too low. Sir, this one. I just try to say.
But you could all use a little help from time to time.
Oh, maybe let's try this one. Plug in. This one is on.
प्ले करिए वहाँ से
बेस है सर
हाँ हाँ उसमें आवाज़ आएगी तो आने लगेगा इसमें अभी वो बोल नहीं रहा है ना बोलेंगे तो आएगी
But we can all use a little help from time to time in our storytelling skills. Therefore,
इसको लगाइए
we're going to be offering a few tips in this talk. And this is the first slide. We call it the and but therefore template.
उसके पीछे
I'll get to it in a few minutes, but I want
हाँ आएगी हाँ आने लगी
That's the biggest. Maybe here, that sound here too. Volume.
storytelling
Yeah, it is. That's already biggest. That's already highest. Can you guys hear it? Okay. I guess
you can also turn on the subtitles so that subtitles
let's see.
in settings yeah that's
स्पीकर वहाँ पे साउंड
I can't do both. I mean, yeah, I think it's not loud enough, but maybe you can move closer. Let's see, let's try it.
storytelling is universal. And
This one doesn't really move. Okay.
इसमें यूट्यूब ही चल रहा है ना yes
Okay, that's lower.
but we can all use a little help from time to time in our storytelling skills. Therefore, and this is the first slide. We call it the and but therefore template. I'll get to it in a few minutes, but I want to begin with a simple question, which is, how much time do you need to tell a story? Could you tell a story in 20 minutes? Could you do it in 30 seconds? Could you do it in 10 seconds? Could you tell a story in just 5 seconds? A few years ago, a website appeared called 5-second films, and I'm showing you one of the films right now. As you watch it, ask yourself, does this tell a story?
Maybe I'll start again. Sorry. Since
Storytelling is universal. And, but, we can all use a little help from time to time in our storytelling skills. Therefore,
Yeah, sorry, the sound wasn't.
Piece of advice that's been going around in recent years, which is that we all
Background is still playing. So yeah, sorry, the sound wasn't loud enough, but hopefully you'll hear the kind of, using subtitle get the insights, right? So the idea is for good writing in general, could be scientific writing, could be the writing movie scripts, right? It's the same idea. You actually try to tell a story, right? So if you can write a story, it doesn't have to be long or short. If you can write a story, that will stick, right? So you want your reader to read your paper or your proposal as a story, right? So what's the key for writing story, as a speaker talk about, is really the and, but, therefore structure, right? So you talk about something and then and something like a and but, that's maybe the knowledge gap, things like that, and then therefore, you want to do something, right? So that's apply proposals, apply to journal articles, anything you write, you want to use this structure, right? So even for presentation, like the speaker mentioned, right? When you go to a conference, give a presentation, you need to talk about background, right? And the background, but we still don't know this, therefore I did this, right? So that structure can also apply for presentation setting as well, right? So I guess really the key thing is make sure you have this type of structure in any paragraph you write, so that will be easy for people to get the picture as a story, right? So this is a proposal actually I wrote, is I think it's a project summary part. Just give you example. Maybe let you read first, and then we'll do exercise like yourself using this structure. Write something, right? It could be a current project you are working on, but it could be a proposal you try to write, or could be some results you already got. So try to use and, but, therefore structure. Try to write that way. So that will be just more effective, more sticky to readers. But first I let you to read this one first. So I guess this one just try to set up examples how this one used in real world, right? So actually when I wrote this proposal at that time, I didn't realize I used this structure, right? So that's kind of afterthought. I realized that's actually a good way to write this way, right? So I guess but if you writing intentionally, that's more effective, right? So I start like pay attention to that and try to write things as a storytelling, right? So I guess so that's how you do that. And this is a proposal, and I think Thursday my talk is actually about this. Just give you a preview for this topic. So and last, really just let's try to do an exercise, maybe 15 minutes, and try to write something yourself. Use the and, but, therefore structure, right? So it could be a proposal, could be a results you have. Could be applied to any type of writing. But you can think about it yourself and then start writing something, and then you can share with a neighbor, and you discuss what read each other's work and give each other ideas. But you can also talk with me as well. So that will be the exercise. So any questions so far? Yeah. I mean, introduction discussion will probably be most powerful ones. Research gap. in terms of a writing of research gap, or how do you actually identify research gap? I mean, which one? Identify research gap, or how do you actually write about the research gap? So that's the kind of inverted triangle thing. Like, you start from a broader field, for example, how climate change will impact the compound, drought and extreme events, right? You can start from the background, say, climate change is happening, is everywhere, right? Is accelerating, right? Whatever the background is, and then you talk about, the potentially, like there are compound events already happening, and climate change should affect the compound events, but we don't know exactly what the degree and how exactly affect, like a kind of a bigger and then funnel down to the kind of smaller version. So, but to write well is really, that's why I said it's harder, because you have to justify every sentence based on literature. Whatever you said, you have to have a support for that. This has been found, but we don't know this, and that's why I study this, things like that. So structure-wise, it's kind of a funnel type of a structure, but you have to use solid literature to support, the structure. Like I say, this general picture, and then narrow down, and then talk about that's a knowledge gap. Yeah, is that? Okay, sure. Any other comments, questions? Yeah, but yeah, again, introduction is a hard one, right? So it's to be able to write well, you have to read a lot besides the techniques. But that means their techniques make you write more effectively, like more storytelling, but it's not all, right? You still need to have a collection of literature. So I guess, yeah, let's use 15 minutes, everybody write something, and based on your research, and then you talk with your neighbors, and try to help each other, see whether you reach the goal, and but therefore structure, and whether people can easily get what you try to describe. So yeah, let's use next maybe 15 minutes. Everybody write something. Yeah, you can use your computer to type, or you can use handwriting. Doesn't matter. How do you write? So questions about what to write. Really think about your research subject, the ones you try to study, and put that into and but therefore structure. Say that again. Yeah, you can just write like one paragraph. So yeah, you can use computer, but you can just write. Yeah. So, hello, can you hear me? Okay. So yeah, I think that's pretty much we are almost time now. Any questions for the structure we talked about? So like I mentioned, like in general, right, like and but therefore the structure could be used for like any scientific writing you use, either research